Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parents. In today's episode, my parents enabled my little brother's minibike mayhem with my minibike. I suggested to my parents that they sell a bunch of my brother's stuff to get some of their money back for his rampage. They did not hesitate. But wait, there's more. My spoiled brat brother has finally been allowed some privileges. And he hates them. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My parents enabled my little brother's minibike mayhem with my minibike. When I was 17, I bought a used minibike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who've read my previous posts know what my little brother is like. The boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic. And anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it. At least until that behavior was exposed to the public when my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. After that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it. And that led to some extra huge tantrums from him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw to the floor and break. Usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from second-hand stores because of that. When I got the minibike, my brother was upset I wouldn't ever let him ride it. But he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, new tire, new handlebars, new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for. And my parents spent hundreds on it. But as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it. Just calls me over begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire. And even then, he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless in where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tire was understandable though, since those wear out. But it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So right, I'm not letting him take my minibike on a joyride. Especially with gas prices being so high these days. The minibike gets like 60 miles per gallon. So what that it only goes 40 miles per hour. I only have a 5-mile commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottled water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike till I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my minibike start up outside and then take off. Little bro took off like a rocket down the street on it before I could get out of the garage. I freaked out, but my parents tried to play it off. Though when I didn't placate them, they said they'd get my minibike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting till my brother came back with it. I was annoyed, and I wanted to call the police. But I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back an hour later. He'd somehow not crashed. But the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas and my parents had to go get him. To say I was furious was an understatement. But my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40 and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. Not sure if it'd help, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my minibike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one. But then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility, and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really? They just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joyriding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves? Whatever. I'm used to their hypocrisy by now. The last time I went to my parents' house, my brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post. But just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. Call the cops next time he commits a carjacking. Maybe a few fines and a chew out from the cops will make them be parents. Tell them all straight up what will happen and that you will press charges. Your parents and brother are human stains of society, they won't learn until someone forces them to. I'd also threaten CPS for endangerment of a minor. All it takes is video proof of them admitting theft. Better yet, don't even help fixing his bike. If they want your help, tell them they need to rein in your brother. Why put your property in jeopardy when they don't seem to give a crap? You and your brother sound just like my cousins. The older one got an Xbox for his 11th birthday, and ever since the younger one found out how to shoot a gun in Fortnite, he had been hogging it. 3 years later, and the younger one has finally gone insane. Hasn't gotten off it in 3 months, and it's to the point where the older one had to go and order a second Xbox. The younger one is literally developing a bald spot and a massive dent on his head from wearing his headset 24/7. I suggested to my parents that they sell a bunch of my brother's stuff to get some of their money back for his rampage. They did not hesitate. But wait, there's more. Well, a while ago someone here commented the idea that my parents should sell a bunch of my brother's stuff. So I talked to my parents about how they could probably recoup some of their losses from the birthday rampage by selling a lot of my brother's stuff. I was surprised by how readily they agreed it was a good idea. I mean, it was like a light bulb moment for them. Then over the weekend they had a big garage sale. They sold my brother's bike, his video game systems, everything. I went to help out with the sale and could hear my brother crying in his room. All of the video game systems he had were sold. And I mean, there was a lot of them. He had a GameCube, a Wii, a 3DS, a Switch, PS2, PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and a ton of games for them all. And they sold all of them. I was pretty tempted to buy something from the sale myself. But I knew if my brother were to be made aware that I had something he used to own, who knows what he might do. So I held back. The bike alone went for $30. They also sold his TV, his RC cars, his drone, and pretty much anything else electronic he owned. They are in the process of selling his gaming PC online now as well. There's a cheap laptop too. But it was mainly used for school, and he was denied access to it for anything else. My parents told me that my brother's room had been stripped of everything but the essentials. While I was visiting during the sale, my brother walked out of his room once, saw me, and then ran back into his room crying loudly. I know fake crying from him when I hear it. And it was as fake as it gets. My parents know this too, and have not fallen for his game. I asked them if he was going to be sent to therapy. And they said they really have no choice but to that. And they fully admitted this was all their fault for enabling him for so long. I could have rubbed it in their faces. But I think the look they saw on my face was enough that they understood. For the past several years, they'd been in progressively worse and worse denial about their bad parenting. Friends and family have been telling them for a long time now that they went way too far spoiling my brother. And that not only would it come back on them one day, but it'd also mean that my brother may be incapable of functioning as an adult. And if that's the case, he'd expect someone to provide for his every need forever. And I would not become his caretaker when they become too old. My brother hadn't shown much improvement over the next few weeks. He was still being a brat, fake crying, getting into more trouble, and even stole another kid's cell phone at school. He was caught playing on it in his closet. And my parents had to return it to the school to find out who it belonged to. Last week I had an idea and suggested a family intervention. My parents were hesitant when I brought it up, but they reluctantly agreed to it. I'm sure their hesitation was because an intervention would put them on the spot along with my brother. Then on the next possible day, all close family and some friends could gather at my parents' house. We formed a circle of chairs in the living room. Initially without my brother in the room. My aunt spoke first. And oh boy, did she let them have it. She'd written an entire speech that we all silently listened to. My parents tried to interject from time to time, but were silenced. When it came to be my turn to speak, I also read a speech I composed. Basically repeating everything I've told on Reddit thus far, and plenty more. My grandparents went next, and it just sort of followed down the line from there. My mother was in tears. And my father just held her. They both apologized to me heavily, and said they were terrible parents. And that they ruined my childhood. I'll never get that back. My aunt loudly stated that it should not have come to this for them to realize their own hypocrisy. And from now on they needed to do better, not only for my sake, but especially for the sake of my brother so he can grow up normal. My brother was brought into the room next. And he was seated away from my parents because my mother would have an urge to coddle him when he was upset. It didn't take long for the family to lay into my brother. He tried fighting us a lot. But when excuses like, "if only they just let me have my way," were about all he could say, we all let him have it about how that's not how the world works. He tried getting help from our mother. But she refused to look at him. He started huffing and acting like he was hyperventilating. Then intentionally fell to the floor. It's not the first time he's done this. My aunt just told him to stop milking it and get up. He screamed at her that we were all ruining his life. And he wishes we were all dead. My parents were horrified. My brother refused to get up off the floor and kept breathing heavily to pretend to have some sort of attack. So everyone just left him laying there while they each said their piece about why they were there to him. He screamed at random a few times, but didn't move from where he'd laid down. Eventually everyone started leaving. And my parents had to actually drag my brother back to his room because he refused to get up off the floor. He's not used to people having no sympathy for him. Especially from our parents. This is gonna be a long uphill battle. My aunt has offered to chip in for therapy, and my parents have taken her up on it. Let's hope therapy does my brother some good. Edit, context, some have been asking what happened with my brother's birthday rampage. Well, to put it simply, he didn't get a PS5, so he went mental with a chair and destroyed whatever he could with it. Which was finally the breaking point for my parents, and they grounded him severely. If y'all want any more details on what happened, just look at my prior posts. I would make sure he can't get to any of your stuff. He's going to retaliate. Remind your parents he will get worse before he gets better, but it will be worth the wait. If it helps, I worked a decade as an officer in a high-security prison. In that time I observed many prisoners who were incarcerated simply because they had been raised as your brother has. They generally have never faced discipline, meaning they have never learned the word no, and are generally extremely narcissistic. This might have been tolerable when they were children, but obviously it is impossible for an adult to behave this way. In short, this intervention is the best possible thing for your brother. I can absolutely guarantee he will spend the bulk of his life in jail otherwise. It might be good for your parents to do therapy and/or take parenting classes. Either way, it's easy to fall back into old patterns simply because that's what they know. Change is hard. While I agree you're right, I think it's more of a one step at a time kind of situation. My parents need to be eased into every change they are being forced to make after the intervention. It's great your family had this intervention, and I'm amazed it had any effect on your brother at all. His reaction gives me hope, and you are the absolute hero in this story. It's going to be 10x harder to undo brother's raising than it would have been to do it as right as possible from the start, and he knows every trick in the universe to get around mom and dad. They will have to be a united front, and will need a lot of help, professional. I wish them the best. My spoiled brat brother has finally been allowed some privileges. And he hates them. Since the family intervention, my parents have kept my brother in check. And they are doing okay in terms of making up for years of treating me like crap. They've even promised to host my next birthday, and have my favorite cake with my name on it. My brother did overhear this because my parents had him doing dishes in the kitchen, and he just stopped what he was doing and went right to his room. No fake crying, just a complete shutdown. He still glares at me from his window every time I leave when I come to visit. A little while ago my parents have allowed my brother some privileges for good behavior. Though to my brother they're basically the opposite of anything he'd like. My parents decided that he could have a little fun for good behavior. So my dad dug out his old N64 and Game Boy Color from the 90s. He still had most of his old games for both systems, and also had an old CRT TV to hook them up to. When they were offered to my brother, he just complained that they were old and boring. My dad just said he could suit himself then, and go back to reading. Took one night before my brother was begging to have the old 90s game systems. He used to have many game systems, a gaming PC, and even a gaming chair with Bluetooth speakers on it. Now all he has is a folding chair or his bed to sit on when gaming. I came by for a visit around the time he first got the N64 because my parents wanted to have me over for dinner, and I got to see my brother in his room yelling at the old CRT TV while playing Mario 64. He really wasn't happy. Especially since he couldn't even go online to check for guides, walkthroughs, or cheat codes. For the Game Boy Color, I saw he had some Pokemon games, and at least one Donkey Kong. My dad has said that if my brother is extra good by the end of the summer, they'll upgrade him to a Game Boy Advance. My parents quickly realized though that the Game Boy Color would eat AA batteries, so my brother has to use a power cord for it now. And he does play it. Maybe because he used to have a phone in his hands playing app games so much. Because my brother likes cycling, but no longer owns a bike since our parents sold it, he was without an outlet to exercise. My dad found a used exercise bike on FB Marketplace and put it in my brother's room. He also got a used CD player mini boombox from somewhere the same day. So yeah, my brother just rides that exercise bike since he can't go outside unless it's to do chores. And he rides it aggressively. He tunes into whatever music gets him going, and then he rides that exercise bike hard. From the look on his face, I'd call it hate riding. Almost like what you'd expect to see on the face of a vindictive prison inmate exercising in their cell and waiting for the day they can get out and get revenge. I had mentioned this to my parents. And they have the same worries that I do. So my dad started burning CDs with my brother's favorite music that used to be on his gaming computer that they also sold. Each burned CD has 10 songs. And he would get one for every week of good behavior. He's only gotten one so far since this started. Not because of bad behavior, but because not enough time has gone by for him to get more. I'm not sure if I'd call my brother's behavior good. He's just not really being bad. I don't hear him complaining out loud anymore most of the time. But I see it in his face. Especially when he glares at me from his window when I get on my minibike to go home. He definitely resents me. But it's not the same look he gives our parents when they aren't looking. He glares at them like they destroyed his life. But if I were to put it into words, he glares at me with envy. Like I have everything he wants. The look just seems to say, just wait till I'm 18. I remember having those same thoughts when I wanted to move the hell out after high school. But I made sure I had life plans with the help of my aunt when I moved out. But my brother doesn't know anything about how to do that. So he's probably still thinking of it in the simplest ways a kid usually would. Oh great! Now I'm sounding like a know-it-all. I have tried to talk with my brother, but he doesn't have much to say. I've been stopping by every few days to spend some time with him. We don't speak much because he's gotten very quiet. But he does seem to enjoy having someone to play with since our parents won't. He eagerly hands me a controller every time I'm there. We've mostly been playing racing games like Mario Kart on Dad's old N64 in my brother's room. And he gets pretty aggressive while playing. He keeps swinging the controller around wildly with nearly every move he makes, and has even shoved me over a few times when he was losing. I've learned to brace my leg so he can't do that. He had a few light tantrums for losing, but is getting a little better. I've had some game FAQs, walkthroughs, and cheat codes of some of the games he's been playing on the old N64 printed out at the local library and put them in a binder for him. And that's made him be a little nicer to me. Our parents wanted to get some stuff for summer homeschooling for my brother. But I warned them that was probably not a good idea. He's already in an almost constant state of anger. And the goal is to mellow him out and make him more accepting life won't go his way like it used to anymore, not piss him off even more. My dad got angry with me about how he's the father and not me. And that sparked an argument where I reminded him of the things that went on over the past decade. All of the favoritism, all of how I was blamed for so much, even how I had to hide my money at my aunt's house because they kept letting my brother try to steal it. I didn't outright say he's a bad parent, but it was heavily implied. He backed off when my mom told him I was right, and trying to force home summer schooling on my brother will not help. That made my dad shut down and he went to drink alone in the living room. My mom has apologized to me repeatedly over her past actions. She says she blames herself because it was her idea to coddle my brother so much, and my dad just went along with it. She told me that back then she was never thinking ahead to what my brother would be like as an adult. She basically refused to admit he was going to grow up. So she just kept spoiling him to try and keep him her as baby. My parents have scheduled couples counseling. But it's gonna be a while before they get in due to the wait period. My dad is pretty obviously not looking forward to it. It's harder to make him admit wrongdoing than my mom. He caved and admitted how much he'd screwed up during the family intervention. But since then he's tried to act like he's just a normal parent. But I've made it clear that pretending that shit didn't happen won't make it go away. And my mom agrees with me. So that's where things are right now. Hopefully my next update will be better. Sounds like a step in the right direction. I'm concerned about your brother though. Is he in therapy? He needs help desperately. Especially with that much bottled up anger. Just the way Opie describes him hate riding that exercise bike, it just leads me to believe he's biding his time. Wow. I think bro is doing well. You can't expect him to change overnight. He still has anger, but he isn't reacting the way he used to. Kudos to you for stepping up and helping him adjust. He does need more than his parents in his life. You are someone he can let his guard down with. Hopefully, he will become less angry soon. And school will be new to him when he returns. Hope he does well there too. He may be unhappy now, but the rest of his life will be better. Because of the hell he's going through now. He's learning things he should have learned a long time ago. And he will have actual true friends before he graduates high school. I'm proud of him. Proud of his parents. And proud of you. Do encourage your brother to read books. That is probably the best thing to do to keep the brain functioning over the summer. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.